even it out.
Okay, well, I do have that it's 5 o'clock, and I am going to go ahead and call to order this special meeting of the Board of Directors. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any comments or questions? If not, would you please read the question?
Who's moved to approve the agenda?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Moving on then to our action items. We've got consider resignations, transfers, and appointments. And the first item we have is resignations.
We have the resignation of Jake Jenkins, and it is my recommendation to accept the resignation of Jake Jenkins effective immediately.
Okay. You've heard the recommendation. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Comments or questions?
Briefly, Shelley, I just want to note I will be voting no on this. That is not to be construed as a level of support for the individual in question. Certainly, I just have concerns regarding harsher action that potentially should be taken, and that a level of support should be shown that behavior in question will 100% not be tolerated.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I agree with Charlie.
Okay. If nothing else, would you please read the question?
Sure. Who's moved to accept the resignation of Jacob Jenkins effective immediately?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay. Motion approved. Moving on to the next section of appointments.
We have, it is my recommendation to approve the appointment of Jocelyn Schaffner as a kindergarten teacher. She would be at a BA Step 2, salary $39,118.
Okay. Heard the recommendation. Do I have a motion to approve? Jocelyn, I think is her name.
Jocelyn. Did I say that wrong?
That's okay.
Jocelyn?
Yep, Jocelyn Schaffner.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, she's doing 5th grade too.
Yep, 5th grade. That's what I was
grade.
thinking. Okay. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Did I already hear the
Yes.
second? Sorry. Motion and second. Any comments or questions from
I
board members?
thought it was good to have 10 applicants.
Okay.
I like that it's a former student coming back.
Okay.
Good kid, so.
All right. Motion and a second. Any other comments? If not, please read the question.
Who's moved to accept the superintendent's recommendation of the appointment of Jocelyn Schaffner as elementary school classroom teacher starting with the 2021-2022 school year at the BA Step 2 salary level of $39,118?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to the next one.
The next recommendation is Candace Whitney. Candace will be an elementary PE teacher, and she will start at the BA Step 2 level, $39,118.
Okay. Heard the recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. How about a second?
Okay.
All right, motion and a second. Yep, that was Lynette. Comments or questions?
19 applicants.
Yep. Okay. All right, if none, then please read the question.
Who's moved to accept superintendent's recommendation of the appointment of Candace Whitney as elementary school physical education teacher starting with the 2021-2022 school year at the BA Step 2 salary level of $39,118?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Did you say I was the second?
It was me.
Oh, I am sorry. Thank you for correcting that. I need to watch instead of just hear out of the...
You were saying, I just heard you say that was Lynette,
It was
and I'm
quiet,
like,
so
I didn't
that's
do
why I thought
anything.
it was you. Sorry, man. All right, moving on for the next one.
The next one is a recommendation to hire Amanda Lemke as a kindergarten teacher at a BA Step 1, $37,885.
Okay. Again, you've heard the recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
A motion from Amanda and a second from Carl. Paid attention. Okay, comments or questions from anybody?
21 applicants.
Thank you.
I mean, I think it's unfortunate because we'll lose her as a good
I know, she's a
substitute.
good substitute.
She loves
Mhm.
doing what she's doing, and she was a Sunday school teacher too, but that'll be a good fit for her.
Okay. All right, would you please read the question?
Move to accept the superintendent's recommendation of the appointment of Amanda Lemke as elementary school classroom teacher starting with the 2021-2022 school year at the BA Step 1 salary level of $37,885.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving on to the next one. Janice.
The next appointment is Janice Dix. She will serve as the OES special education teacher. She will come in at an MA 30 step 13, $65,333. Except Chad's got it in there as, right now, we're gonna approve MA step 13 until she provides the appropriate documentation to move over to the MA 30 lane.
Lane, correct. So
Thank you.
60,000.
We don't have transcripts yet, so tonight, let's approve MA step 13, $60,199.
Okay. You've heard the motion, or you've heard the recommendation. Do I
So
have a
moved.
motion? Thank you. How about a second? Okay. Any comments or questions?
So interestingly, I hired her at the AEA, and now I hire her
Very
here.
good.
Okay. Okay, if no other comments, then please read the question.
Please vote to accept the superintendent's recommendation of the appointment of Janice Dix as elementary school special education teacher starting with the 2021-2022 school year at the MA Step 13 salary level of $60,199.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on. I think we've got coaches, and we can do those together.
You want to do them all together?
Yes,
You're
please.
fine.
Okay, we have a recommendation from Mr. Parker to hire Brandon Lenhart as middle school football coach, Jeff Furstein as assistant varsity football coach, and I believe we have one more. Nope, is that
Those
it?
are the only two
Those
I
are the
saw,
only two.
unless you added one
Nope,
last set.
didn't add one.
Okay. You've heard the recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Comments or
Is he a
questions?
teacher? Is he a teacher?
Yes, both of them are.
Both of them.
I know Mr. Linhart is, I wasn't familiar with his name.
Mhm, high school.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, please read the question.
Please vote to accept the superintendent's recommendation of the appointment of Brandon Lenhart as middle school football coach and Jeff Furstein as varsity assistant football coach starting with the 2021-2022 school year.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on. To our next topic on the agenda is review of personnel practices, and we haven't done this for a bit, but our attorney, Drew Bracken, is here. Yep, to kind of do some education for us as a board on personnel practices.
Good evening.
Good evening.
It's actually nice to be here when you're, as I was mentioning, I'm often the person that shows up when there's a little bit of trouble, right? When some people you're getting sued or something like that, and the law firm gets called, that sort of thing. It's nice to be here when you're appointing new staff and hiring teachers and hiring coaches, just to see that little part of it. Sometimes I forget about. There's a lot of good news going on. But I've been invited to talk a little bit with the board about personnel practices from the school district's point of view. Give you a sort of a broad overview of the board's role, the superintendent's role, the process that's available to your employees, that sort of thing, and then answer any questions that you may have along the way about policy, about process, about the various roles of the board and the administration. The first reminder I always share with school boards is that you are a corporate board of directors. In fact, you're a board of directors of a multi-million-dollar corporation, and your responsibility is for the general oversight and operation of that municipal corporation. To get the work done of the corporation, of course, you have to employ a lot of staff in various roles, and you've got staff that fall into different categories from sort of a legal point of view. And you'll see it in your own board policies. You set policy regarding employment practices. You set policy regarding expectations for employees. You've got your whole 400 series of policies relates to how to run the personnel management operations of the district. A lot of those policies are kind of set for you from the legislature, to be quite honest. There are laws and procedures that you have to follow. from our state legislature. There's laws and procedures that you have to follow from even the federal government on things like wage and hour laws and stuff like that. It's a highly regulated part of your work. But inside that, you still have local policies, and you have local procedures, and you have local expectations as well. But that's your number one role as a corporate board of directors, is to set policy, establish procedure. From a day-to-day management point of view, your direct way of doing that is actually the one person who you do directly supervise, and that's your chief executive officer or your superintendent. So as a board of directors, you do have responsibility for directing and supervising and evaluating the work of your superintendent. From there on, it's much like any other corporation where it's like a chain of command. In fact, I preach chain of command all the time for all sorts of people involved in the organization, because the chain of command is how any organization, you need a chain of command in order for the organization to work. And we do that with students and families, by the way, too. If a student and family has an issue with a teacher, the first place they should go with their issue is the teacher, right? Or whoever they may be interacting with in the community, that sort of thing. And they work issues up and down the chain of command. You work through your superintendent through the chain of command as well. There's something unique, though, about public school districts that it puts you in a very unique role in terms of your personnel practices. There's a couple of occasions when you are the ultimate decision maker on personnel practices, and we saw two ends of that tonight already. You receive resignations, you issue contracts of hire as well. You are the ultimate decision maker on who is hired, or who resigns, or who is fired from the school district, ultimately. But does that mean that you guys conduct interviews for every classified employee, that you engage in all the human resources practices that it takes to hire, train, supervise, evaluate, discipline, and perhaps even terminate a teacher or a support staff member? And the short answer is no. You work for your administration and your chain of command to do all those functions, right? But there is that one unique function of the sort of the ultimate decisions, the hiring and the sometimes firing. And there's something unique about being on a school board when it comes to firing. And I think it's just something I have to remind lots of school boards about, because frankly, I think most community members might not quite appreciate this until they really understand the role. If the superintendent ever is in a position to recommend to the board that an employee of the district be terminated from their employment, whether it's a classified employee or a member of the faculty, teacher. And I'm going to put administrators and superintendents aside for just a moment, because they're just sort of another class of employees. But for faculty members, for teachers, counselors, coaches even, for classified employees, support staff employees, from time to time, superintendents have to recommend to the board that this employee be terminated for one reason or another, poor performance or misconduct or other, inability to do the job kind of things, that kind of thing. That employee, because you're a municipal corporation, a public corporation, is entitled to due process of law. And part of that due process is having a fair decision maker in that process. In order to be a fair decision maker, an individual who sits on the board of directors cannot have any bias or involvement in a controversy beforehand. This is very familiar. Everybody understands this when they think about juries in trials. We all know that if somebody's accused of a crime, for example, they're entitled to a trial. They're entitled to a trial in front of a jury who's not an impartial jury, who's not been involved in the matter that's the subject of the criminal allegation, right? From time to time, especially this quite frankly, it's kind of a fact of life in Iowa in a lot of school districts, is a lot of school districts have school board members active in the community. They know lots of people in the community. They know lots of parents. They know lots of students. They know lots of staff, right? And so sometimes it's unavoidable that they may have some familiarity with individuals, with families, with students, with staff, with controversies even. Some familiarity is not necessarily an occasion to make somebody biased or partial in hearing a matter that's recommended to the board. But definitely we don't want board members who are directly involved in any particular controversies or too familiar with the controversy lest they be a partial or biased decision maker. And so I'm going to take a lot of blame here, because that's not just me, my whole profession when those of us that represent school boards across the state are always telling our school boards, sometimes you have to be just let your administration do its thing. If you as a school board get involved too quickly or too prematurely involved in a controversy involving an employee, if that matter comes to you as a decision maker about whether their employment should be terminated or not by the board, can you still sit as an impartial decision maker? And us lawyers are always counseling our school board clients, be careful about losing that partiality or losing that impartiality and being accused of being partial. I've literally been at hearings involving recommendations to terminate employees of districts where the association representative begins the hearing with the process of asking board members, what do you know about this situation? How have you been involved? That kind of thing. Because they're protecting their members' due process interests in that. So I know it's a matter of frustration with a lot of school boards. And a lot of community members sometimes wonder, well, why doesn't the school board know more about a situation involving my son's teacher, or my daughter's coach, or my daughter's school bus driver, or and on down the list? Why didn't the school board? Because I'm going to call my friend who's on the school board, and I'm going to ask them to get involved and go talk to that coach or that bus driver or that teacher or something like that. And I'm going to recommend to you guys, be wary. You have an administrative team. And as a corporate board of directors, what you should do in any of those situations is you recommend to that parent, well, I encourage you to go visit with the teacher, coach, or bus driver, or their supervisor. And I, on behalf of the board, I will let the superintendent know we talked, and I'll have the superintendent double check too. And so we back to the chain of command through the two different directions. That we go. Do you as a school board member go look up that coach or that bus driver or that teacher and say, hey, what's this about what the Jones family is telling me about what's going on with their son or daughter? If you take it upon yourself, beware. You just that's probably the clearest example I can give you of sort of crossing that partiality line or that bias line if and when it becomes necessary for the board to make a decision regarding that person's employment. That being said, can you learn from individual circumstances? Can you as a board decide, wait a minute, we may need to adjust policy. We may need to adjust procedures. We may need to increase training for staff, increase employment procedures, supervision procedures, stuff like that on a broad basis? Absolutely. That's wise management from a board level. If you learn something, you learn from that experience and you adopt policy or procedures going forward to help avoid those controversies going forward. That's good boardsmanship, I'll use that term. And thinking about how can we make for a better school district as we learn through experiences, positive and negative. If we do something that turns out right, we need to keep doing that, right? If we do something, we do something that creates controversy, wait a minute, what do we need to adjust to make sure that we don't have that kind of controversy again? That's absolutely an appropriate place for the board to be. I just wanted to remind board members and community members that sometimes what we have to keep the board as the board of directors and keep them able to serve in their role as boards of directors rather than as investigators or disciplinarians or prematurely acting as judge and jury. Frankly, there is a part where you do act as judge and jury, but that's when a matter is brought to for formal consideration by your superintendent and administrative team. Now, administrators and superintendents, like I said, a little bit differently. You do have a direct relationship with your administrators and specifically your superintendent. But even with administrators, like the determination process for administrators is unique. The board begins that process in the eyes of the law. It's not the last decider. The board actually begins that process. And if an administrator wants, they can have a hearing in front of an administrative law judge. That's that fair and impartial decision maker. But then, and that person's decision can come back to the board for reconsideration. And of course, with superintendents, you are the evaluator. You are the supervisor for that one employee of the school district, who then you hold accountable for the management of the entire organization, right? So I'm here to just take a little bit of the blame. Us school board lawyers are always counseling our clients, our school board members, to implement a strong system, hire good managers, and then let them do their work, subject to your review. And then when it's time to make a decision, you're in a position that you can be making that ultimate decision regarding termination. and by the way, there's sort of an analogous situation with students as well. And unfortunately, we don't do this very often, but from time to time, a student is recommended for expulsion from school because the student is engaged in serious misconduct or whatnot. The same basic rule would apply in those cases too. If any board member is involved prematurely in a matter involving student discipline, and the student is ultimately recommended to the school board for expulsion, can that school board member sit as on that jury, so to speak, and sit as judge and jury of that student who's being recommended for expulsion? If the board member is too prematurely involved, then certainly you get the recommendation from me that the board member should probably recuse themselves from participating in that process, lest they have a concern that the student or the student's family says, oh, we didn't get a fair hearing in front of the school board because the board president had her mind made up before we even began. Just to pick on you for a moment, but you know, you're welcome. But so there's a reason why us lawyers are often counseling that restraint and direction to your administrative team to manage those things. You guys set policy. Obviously, you pay the bills. You approve your budgets. You set policy, you establish procedure, you may approve handbooks and work rules, that sort of thing, and you have your administrative team that reports to you on how they're running the human resources portion of the district, just to keep our focus here on this item of discussion. But I know that there are moments when that can be a very frustrating place to be for board members. But when you look at it from a very, very objective point of view, you like go back to that where I began. You are on a board of directors of a multi-million-dollar corporation, and you're here to set policy, manage resources, make sure you've got the right people in place, the right policies and procedures in place to run the organization. If there are any particular questions of me, or any questions that you may have heard from community members from time to time that, why don't you guys do this or that? Or why don't you, Sean, or you, Shelley, or you, Carl? I know you guys will get individually. People will think that you can do something. Well, you're one member of a board of directors.
A lot of times I hear, and this is also from my previous life, but why can't you just fire them? Mm-hmm. And that came a lot from my husband who was in banking.
Yes.
Like, you just take care of it.
Yes.
And it was hard to explain that schools are different
Yes.
than that is. And we still don't understand that
Yes.
totally in our household, but
Yes.
I'm with Roger.
I know. But it's different.
It is.
And
Yeah.
and especially as a board, because, you know, as an administrator, I could see things that I didn't like or whatever, but to do all of those procedural steps and to make certain that you wouldn't terminate someone because you didn't like them or you had ethical issues with
Right.
them, and that led me into some issues
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
That
Want to talk
difference
a little bit
between-
about just cause, maybe?
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
And-
I needed that term.
Right. With all your employees, you might even have at-will employees, people that can be terminated on little or no notice, right? And people that can quit on little or no notice at the same time. And a lot of classified employees in a lot of school districts are essentially at-will. Or you might have policies, I didn't check your policy, you might have a policy that says 15 or 30 days notice or something like that on without cause, okay? Or immediately for cause. So if you want to fire somebody right away, your own policy probably says you have to have cause, right? Not just, that's the last time you're going to wear that tie, mister, out you go. You know, that kind of willy-nilly kind of decision making. So your own policies probably say you have to have cause, which is in fact a good thing because it protects the district from claims that they are engaging in arbitrary decisions or that they're engaging in discriminatory decisions, which is frankly the larger risk anymore. Anyway, anybody can go to the Civil Rights Commission and say they got rid of me because of my fill in the blank. And we all have those blanks. You know, it could be race, sex, religion, disability, etc. Right? You know, I'm an old white guy. And you got rid of me because I'm an old white guy. You know, and that's all the reason they got rid of me, because I never had any cause. Well, so to protect the organization from charges of discrimination or charges of arbitrary termination, which is something in the public sector we have to worry about. The public sector, nobody can be fired for arbitrary reasons. It's still a denial of due process, okay? So you have to have justification at one level or another, rationale at one level or another. For your classified employees, we might be able to terminate at-will employees essentially on 30 days notice without cause, but you're giving them that much notice. Now let's go up, the next layer of employees might be faculty, teachers and counselors, nurses. Teachers, counselors, nurses, okay? They all have contracts that are set by statute. And the statute says you can't terminate them without just cause, which is a term, that phrase is a term of art. It's a fairly high standard. It's usually a demonstrated incompetence at their job that's proven, or willful misconduct that's proven. Violation of the rules that we can prove. And not only do we have to have those issues at stake, but they're entitled to a whole process, which is, I guess I sort of jumped the gun. That's the process you're involved in. If somebody is accused of, incompetence, you're a terrible fill in the blank, whatever you do. Nurse, teacher, counselor. And we've got evaluations that show that you're terrible at your job, you're incompetent at your job. The recommendation is made to the board. They're entitled to a hearing in front of the school board. In fact, they're entitled to more than that. If they're not probationary, they're entitled to appeal that decision all the way to the Iowa Supreme Court if they like. So so it's a legally protected contract with statutory terms. You're involved in that process at the ultimate decision-making stage. And that even that decision can be appealed and reviewed by a district court judge, the Iowa Court of Appeals, or even the Iowa Supreme Court. Do you have just cause? Why can't you just fire somebody? Well, if they're a faculty member, teacher, counselor, or nurse, you have to have just cause, not just anger or whatever, or maybe somebody just rubs you the wrong way or something like that. If you were in the private sector, you'd have much more leeway, by the way, but you're not in the private sector, you're in the public sector. If you ran a private parochial school, you might have much more leeway to terminate a teacher or a counselor or a nurse who doesn't satisfy your interests in what they're doing at work. That's it. Bracken, that's enough. We've had enough of you, you're out. But you're a public school district and you're bound by those laws that have standards and procedures built right into them, especially for faculty members and to a different extent, administrators. Okay? And then your own policies probably build in everything else for your classified staff. So look to your own policy. And the whole time what we're guarding against, us lawyers are advising you and your administrative team, have good policies and procedures that protect you from claims by people who may claim that they were wrongfully terminated or discriminated against in the workplace for one reason or another.
So you could say, following these, we protect ourselves as a board.
Yes, yes.
And as individual members?
Yes, that's true too. Yes. Now individually, the only good news I'm going to have for you all night probably is individually, you're still as long as you're doing your job, you're protected by the district itself. Mm-hmm. The district's insurance covers you in your role as board members. There's a state law that says the district will cover members of the board, in fact, employees, as long as what they're doing is part of their role as employees or as board members, or frankly, even volunteers are protected by the district. If you had, somebody was chaperoning a student trip and the student was injured and they claimed the chaperone was negligent in his or her supervision, well, as long as they were trying, they'll be covered by the district. Well, that's true for board members too. But what you have to be doing, though, is you have to be trying to do your job to the best of your ability, and you're not willfully ignoring, the expectations.
Policies and procedures.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. My general advice for staff is always, follow your own policies and procedures, and that's your safe harbor. Mm-hmm. I did what the board told us to do in the policies and procedures that they adopted. Mm-hmm.
I wish Roger was here, he could have listened. One more person to say, it just doesn't work that way, Roger.
He doesn't watch every board meeting?
I know.
I don't know how many of you may work in the public sector, or I imagine most of you work in the private sector. Private sector, it is a different set of rules. much more freedom to maneuver if you're a business operator in the private sector.
Other questions or things that come up? Sounds like no, you did a great job of giving us a good
Well,
overview.
Right, I love this stuff, but I'm happy to have any questions. But, and I'll stick around for the closed session portion too. If you have specific questions about specific individuals,
Okay,
I'll be here.
okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, I think that maybe brings us to that part
Did you wanna
of
read this,
the,
Sure.
someone has a motion to make?
I move to enter into a closed session to evaluate an individual whose appointment, hiring, performance, or discharge is being considered as provided in Iowa Code Section 21.5 and pursuant to the individual's request.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second, and I believe this is a roll call vote.
Correct. Shelley Hare,
Yes?
Sharma Parlett,
Yes.
Charlie Comfort,
Yes.
Carl Drost,
Yes.
Amanda McGraw, Sean Moyer,
Yes.
Annette Stream.
Yes.
Okay.
Closed session. 5:30.
Yep.
Okay.